Let's say live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday with us here at Cannabis Nurses of Color. My name is Sandra Gwines, and we have our moderator, the lovely Ivory Rosenthal Davis. Tonight with us, we have two very special guests from NurseGrown Organics. We have the nurse herself, Jessalyn Dolan. She's also the farmer there. She is an herbalist. She has an extensive list of specialties and just wonderful experience that we're going to get to know about extensively in a minute. And then her partner, also co-farmer, let's call him. He's probably the one that does most of the work, I'm going to say. Okay, let's see. Who is it? 50-50? Who is it?
I'd say about 50-50, honestly.
50-50? Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
And then we also have Matt. And Matt, how do you say your last name?
Leonetti.
Leonetti. Okay, yeah. Matt Leonetti. So they're going to be talking to us today about something that is super important, guys. I feel like, we always laugh and joke about the gas station CBD, but there's also, a lot of misconception of what's out there, what we're really getting, the end product. And so I love talking to people who know what happens, who know what to look for in labs and the quality of CBD or cannabis or any kind of cannabis products that we're looking at. What should we be looking at? I mean, that's the big important thing. I live in California and I feel like, people grow it, you can get products from everywhere. It's kind of like the wild, wild west. And so sometimes people don't even care or think to look at labs, but I definitely urge you to look at them. They're super important. This weekend, I had a wonderful group of nurses and we were looking at these labs from one of the strains from the NurseGrown, lab, the NurseGrown farm. And they were just fascinated with all the details of the lab report. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself, Jessalyn and Matt. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about the NurseGrown farm, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we need to be looking for in our weed.
Sure. You want to go first?
Go for it.
All right. Thanks for having us, guys. Good to be here. So I'm a registered nurse. I've been specializing in opioid and use disorder and mental health comorbidities, specifically in pregnancy and infancy. And way before that, I was an herbalist and a massage therapist and owned a yoga studio. So I went about a lot of my career opposite of a lot of most nurses. I was doing a lot of the holistic herbalism work before I became a nurse, brought it into my nursing, and after about 10 years said, wait a minute, I need to go back to my herbal roots because we're doing something wrong here. So it's kind of been an interesting path for me. So I've been using different medicinal herbs for decades, and cannabis has definitely been one of them. I'm a medical marijuana patient myself from a car accident I was in the 80s. I've had at least 3 dozen surgeries since then, and cannabis has definitely been a huge support for me along the way. I'm also a caregiver that cultivates for another nurse. So I grow cannabis for another nurse who's in breast cancer remission. So the plant's been a big part of my life without, inside and out of nursing, before nursing, during nursing. And now we're getting to kind of combine all of that, which has been really fun. So Matt's experience and my experience kind of combined, and hence NurseGrown was born. I'm also a research nurse. So the more I researched, the more I realized the cannabis products that were out there were not quite what we were willing to support and use. So Matt and I together kind of decided to get into his aspect of work a little more, which is the organic side of farming. So I'll let him tell a little bit about himself.
That's awesome. Yes, Matt, let's talk to us, Matt. Tell us, what's up?
So I've been growing cannabis pretty much my whole life. I am also a convicted felon for growing cannabis over 20 years ago, and I am one of those products of the drug war. Still with it because I understand and respect the power of this plant, the capabilities of it for those of us that need healing. But I have a degree in soils. I'm very big into organics. I'm very big into supporting certification programs that offer transparency and a little more regulatory teeth so that people know that they're getting something that's relatively clean. So my emphasis is, on the horticulture side. I'm not going to go through all my everything about myself, but I'm big into organic living soils and producing the best, cleanest medicine that we can possibly grow.
I love it. So before you are NurseGrown Organics, and were you growing just for yourselves? Okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
And then, because I think that's the
Patient and caregiver.
yeah.
And then the more we looked into things, the more we realized I wasn't going to give myself or my patients or my family the CBD that was out there. So we started to look into hemp license. And then after a couple years of growing even hemp, we realized even the products that were out there weren't as tested and transparent, as clean as we wanted. So took a couple years, but hence NurseGrown Organics was born. It's been just about a year right now that we're actually selling products. So
That's awesome.
Wow.
Well, that's like, I mean, the turnaround to like you guys actually getting NurseGrown out there is a culmination of like all your experience, all your things. You were a holistic nurse before holistic was cool.
yeah, kind of.
Right. You know, so which I think is a challenging as a maternity nurse who was always about like natural birth. I felt like I was always like the weird hippie nurse. So I definitely can understand and relate to that. So when you're talking to us about, you know, the soil and all of these things, you know, I feel like a lot of people, I go to the grocery store and the truth is I don't know the difference between organic and non-organic, except that it's more expensive, right? Like I always feel like I want to know what makes this organic. What is it that makes this organic? You know what I mean? Because sometimes I feel like, is this just a sticker you're putting on here so that I can pay higher prices on these products? So tell us you know, what does it mean to grow organic? Because everyone thinks cannabis, because of what it is organic, right? This is where people are going. They're like, this is natural, but we can really defile the plant. You know what I mean? Like we can really, you know, add things to the plant that can take nutrients out, that can reduce the quality, all that. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us what makes these plants, you know, what is the method and how do we know that we're getting something that's organic?
I guess when we talk about organics, we're talking about more so the regulatory side of things. So if a product is to be organic, and let's talk about, you know, vegetables at a store, most of those they can be grown in compost, in soil. You can add all the mycorrhizal fungi, all those wonderful beneficial soil components. And so that product absolutely could in that regard be organic. However, because we are now, at least under the Farm Bill, the USDA is now regulating this industry. So we are held to the standards of the National Organic Program. Let's understand the National Organic Program as it was hijacked by the USDA probably 2.5, 3 decades ago. And in so the industry, agricultural industry has put in all of their components to this, and we've watered down what the USDA label, in my opinion, has come to represent. It is not about the safety of consumers. It is a pay-to-play scheme, and it is basically untested products. They barely do any testing. So people think they're going to the store and yeah, you're paying a lot more for those apples over these apples, and there's no testing behind it. So what I got into was Clean Green, and Clean Green is a certification certification firm for the cannabis industry, and we've been around since 2004. We are the largest nationally recognized certified body in this industry, and the standards we are held to are not only agricultural standards, but they are for the food handling industry as well. So this is post-harvest components as well. So a product these days, especially if you see a USDA organic label on a hemp product, they have gone through a certification process. However, some of the misunderstandings of that is that those products don't require any testing to get that label. It is simply about the process and some of the inputs. So the final product is not tested unless that firm, unless that CBD supplier wants to test it. It has no requirements whatsoever. So organic is you know, a buzzword that everyone wants to stick on their product to kind of get that premium recognition, but it really doesn't come with anything more than conventional grown components as well.
Is there a minimum testing that is required for CBD? I'm using CBD because CBD is available more readily everywhere, right? And then we have our, you know, medical marijuana. So like, do you feel is for CBD, I feel like I don't even know what's out there anymore. I'm like, I go to everywhere I go, it's everywhere, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But is there like a minimum testing that we should be expecting?
Well, you know, you said it earlier, we're in the Wild West here. You know, this is a new industry. We're all on it. The FDA doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing. The USDA doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing. They throw tidbits here. You know, I think it's the companies that are doing that testing, but a lot of the testing they're doing is just for potency. And if you were to look at a lab report, I don't think most people could verify the numbers that are on the bottle based on the report they got because of the different, you know, milligrams to grams to milliliters, those kind of things. So there absolutely is no testing in this industry, to my understanding, unless states are mandating it on their own. So this is where those companies that, you know, want to do a little bit more and want to do better by their customers and their clients, are willing to be transparent, because the power of this plant, you know, we should backtrack just a quick second, that it is an amazing bioaccumulator. It will bioremediate soils beyond belief. And they're using it in, you know, the Ukraine to deal with Chernobyl and those kind of things. So that speaks to what this plant has the ability to pull out of the soil. So knowing that alone, we need to look for those things that this plant has the potential to remove from those soils, because if we're working in the world of health and wellness, we want to make sure that what you're taking, especially from us, is clean and safe. I don't want to cause any more issues by something that may have bioaccumulated. We need to have that transparency. And I think full panel lab testing goes far above and beyond an organic certificate, because if the last piece of the puzzle is that final product, and if it's tested and if it is tested accurately, then we have the best picture of a safe product.
That's awesome. I mean, the thing about it is, you know, you see a lot of products, and you know, I always tell people, well, look on the product. They should have a place where you can go and look up the labs. And sometimes they're like, no. And I'm like, well, can you look and see if there's like a batch number? And they're like, no, you know, and then they may find like a lot number or something, but there's nothing on the website or anywhere where you can go back to them. So I'm just gonna kind of revisit what you said. So the minimum we should be looking at if we're looking for a high quality product is transparency through that third party testing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
you
then
said
what,
which we haven't mentioned yet, which is super important to note, that when we're looking at lab testing, we don't want in-house lab testing. We want that third party, completely independent lab testing and that verification to take that concern out of it right off the bat. Now,
with the labs, because I have seen labs that are okay, and then I've seen labs that are great. And I think that there's a lot. I mean, is there anything that we should be looking at when we're looking at these labs? Like what, you know, for layman's purposes, you know, because we have other people other than nurses listening here. But, you know, what would some things that we should look at on our lab reports that you guys are showing? And I can pull one up that I have for NurseGrown, if that would be helpful. Only because I did this yesterday, because I learned something yesterday.
Really the easiest part about labs is it pretty much lists pass or fail, and it's going to be pretty obvious if you're failing. It usually says fail right in red. So that makes it very easy to note that there's something alarming jumping out at you. And 9 out of 10 times, a company will not post those labs online transparent if there's something alarming that they don't want people to see.
Okay, so most of the time, it's just the absence of labs that would be something to be concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a real, you know, the component of this is we have no standardization in testing. So a lab in California, even though it gets the same product, may have a different result from a lab in Florida. And this is what has become very difficult. Standardization. So my lab may be fine here, and I might be right on that federal threshold of, you know, 0.3. This other lab's going to pick it up, and they may do it based on a different temperature, pressure, something else. And then all of a sudden it's non-compliant. So I think that speaks volumes to the fact that testing is all over the place. We have no standardization across the board.
Let me ask this too, on the third party independent, on the independent labs, third parties, is there like, do FDA or UD, well, probably FDA, do they provide like a listing? Like, so anybody, where do you vet a lab? If that makes sense. Like, are they on an approved list that you pick one of these from, or, you know, or does it vary by state?
Each state has different regulations. We personally test our product out of state because of a specific certification that they hold. It's a ISO, the International Standardization. Am I saying it right? I always forget what the acronym is, but ISO is kind of the gold standard. And oftentimes, if you don't have a lab in state, like Vermont's very small and we're very new to the cannabis game, we have one right over the border in Massachusetts that we send out for all of our labs. So ISO is what I tend to look for and recommend.
Okay, yeah.
Good question.
Yep.
Now, when people come to you and they are buying any product, let's say you guys have somebody who's getting, you know, flour or any end product that you guys put out there, every single product that if you make a bomb, is that lab tested?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And generally what we'll do, depending on where we are in the process, we generally sometimes have the extract itself tested. And then once the products are assembled and put together, we will go again and have that full panel lab tested as well. Because when you think about the supply chain and how products are put together and conveyor belts and all kinds of other things, there could be metal shards. There's all these different points of contamination from the point that that extract is finally in a lab to the point that that final bottle is filled. So knowing that just the extract is clean, let's take it a step further and let's batch test these, hoping that everything is consistent and we're going to be relatively uniform. But this shows that the whole process has been verified, and even the end product, there's been nothing that's happened during this filling process that has created something that may impact you in a negative way.
And so with farms, okay, I know this is probably gonna be a state to state thing, but do you guys have to report like what kind of pesticides you're using or anything like that?
Each state is a little different. Some states have allowed certain components. I also believe now that the USDA has taken over under the Farm Bill, there are some approved products. We spray nothing, and we're actually exempt from pesticide testing because of our Clean Green certification. However, we go above and beyond, and we just had our fields tested for over 118 different pesticides. And this is while the plants are flowering. You take it right on the topsoil or along the drip line. So yes, we fully believe in having that done, even though we didn't have to do it, because I want to show that my product is as clean as it can possibly be. And if it means it costs me a little bit more, it's your health and your wellness that I'm willing to spend that money on.
Very cool. So I do have a question because someone asked me and I figured I'd let you guys answer this. So someone said, what's the difference between craft cannabis and regular cannabis? And I just felt like this was a good conversation because well, the other thing is, I mean, I recently just heard, I mean, sometimes I feel like I learn things that I don't want to learn, but I just learned that we were getting hemp from China. So, and I'm like, and I just felt like my soul started to like die right in that moment. Because I'm like, why? We have like all these great farms and farmers here, and we're getting this product, and now something else that we don't know what's in it. But again, you know, my question for you guys, and I feel like I lost my train of thought here. Oh no, but my question was, what is the difference between craft cannabis and regular? This was the question that I had. I had an explanation, but I want to see what the NurseGrown folks have to say about that.
You know, that's a really tough one. And I think, and the reason being is that, you know, everyone defines craft a little differently. You know, some people are willing to say, you know, my 10 acres is craft because it's all hand done. We take this kind of time and care and this laborious components versus some of the larger scale farms that are fully mechanized. So I guess we're trying to keep the essence of the plant, the original plant energy. And to me, that doesn't mean going through, mechanized trimmers, through combines and those kind of things. I'm out there with my hands. I'm looking at those plants every single day. I know my plants in and out, almost every single one of them. So craft to me is small, and it's dependent on the time and energy that people put into it. And we put an enormous amount of energy into those plants. So because craft is never really defined, I consider it more of a small scale labor of love as opposed to the larger farms. And that's not to say some of the larger farms, especially some of the farms out in California, Ridgeline, Sticky Fields, those guys are phenomenal. They are big, but they are phenomenal. And I would still consider them full-blown craft farmers because of their attention to detail. And I think the devil always hides in the details. And I think it's the details that really set craft apart from commercial cannabis.
I love it. So what are some of the things, I was looking at these lab reports the other day, and I was looking at different metals and stuff like that. And I was really surprised. And this is something that, caught my attention is there an allowable level of lead that we can, you knew where I was going with this, lead that we can have in our plants and that we're allowed to consume? Because that was definitely surprising, because I grew up in the Bronx, and those like pre-war buildings that it's like lead everywhere, lead paint. Yeah. And I grew up with like, don't eat the paint chips. I tried my best, y'all. But seriously, what, some of the metals that were in there kind of surprised me. So can you tell us a little bit about, what we can expect in our cannabis as far as some of those metals, and, are there any levels, like I know like mycotoxins, all that stuff, are we expecting to see any of that stuff in there? Like, tell us a little bit about what would be considered normal for those compounds that we might kind of be shocked to consider in our cannabis.
I think, if you think about it, think about what's allowed in our food products.
I don't want to.
Exactly. If you ever watch Food Inc., you're probably going to turn it off in the first 15 minutes.
Right.
And so, the USP has, in certain components, has put together components for cannabis that, these are regulatory standards that do have, passable limits. So if you're under these defined terms of, 500 parts per billion, 500 million parts per million, you will pass. Same with food. These things are also in food, and food products are not entirely tested on for many things. So one thing I don't think we know is are these small doses, let's say there's a small dose of cadmium in a lab report, will that bioaccumulate, and what are the long-term effects if someone was to take that product for 2, 3, 4 years? I don't know if we really know that in the cannabis industry. I'm sure this information is probably somewhere else, but I think a lot of people are not thinking about some of those long-term effects of some of even the small minuscule amounts that might be hiding in a tincture or otherwise. But then again, allowable limits, I would hope that they have done their due diligence to say that long-term, these will not have an effect because your body will synthesize and move them along. So this is where it kind of gets out of my realm of understanding a little bit. But generally, I'm looking for a lab report that tells me ND, which means non-detectable.
Yeah.
And I think there's also different standards for different things, like smokable flower should absolutely be tested for mycotoxins. That is one of the biggest things in my opinion, where tinctures and stuff should have the mycotoxins, the heavy metals, as well as the residual solvents and those kind of things. So I think each product has a little bit of a different testing component to it, but all in all, they should be full paneled across the board, in my opinion.
And transparent. And that's, how I feel is where you put it out there for information. And if it's alarming, hopefully the company's not putting it out there because they don't have that product out there. But I'm right there with you, Sandra. When I saw all our labs and certain things, I reached out to one, if not two, very high level famous doctors out there that you and I respect.
Yeah.
Hey, I got to ask about this and check into this. Is this okay? I needed that confirmation from people way above me to explain it to me to feel comfortable with that allowable level and working within those different ranges. Because it is alarming when you see something that's not 100%, what you were expecting or perfect.
Right.
And Jocelyn, when you spoke earlier about the gold standard, so we know ISO is one of the things you look for. Then the clean green. Is there any other, or those are the two major things that really define the gold standard?
I would say full panel lab tested, really.
And full panel. Okay.
The big industry standard is, lab tested, lab tested, lab tested. But is it a third party independent lab? What is it lab tested for? So if it's just tested for cannabinoids, honestly, that's the least of my worries. Because what do we say, Sandra? Low and slow, right? So whether it's 2 milligrams or 12 milligrams, that's not as important to me as, wow, this has mycotoxins and this has heavy metals, and that's way too much to accumulate. So I tell people,
I'm always more concerned too, because I feel like we're still in a place where a lot of the dosing is very, subjective. You know what I mean? So I always feel like, well, we just don't even know how much, each individual is consuming. So I always have there's always these little questions in the back of my head. I wanted to ask, and this is either for Jesselyn or Matt, but so another thing that was very exciting, everyone knows CBD and THC. It's like, they get all the airtime, and but there's so many other like absolutely amazing cannabinoids, right? And so one of the things that I want to encourage people is to learn what other cannabinoids are, in your plant or in your your tinctures, etc., because they have different benefits. So when we were looking at one of the particular oils, one of your CBD oils, we saw all of these cannabinoids in there, and it was very exciting to see that CBD does get the highlight, and THC, but there were so many other beneficial cannabinoids, and people don't realize that if you're not getting a full spectrum plant that's been extracted in the proper way, you don't know if you're getting all those cannabinoids in the end. So that's why it's lovely to have these lab reports, because after we looked at them, we were like, now we know why why this works and why it, benefits, I think it was beta carotene was like the top one, right? Yeah. So we were like, okay, this makes so much sense, like relaxing and pain relief and all. So we were just kind of looking at all of those. But tell us a little bit about the cannabinoids, and then what are some cannabinoids that people can find in, obviously every plant is different, but what are some other stars in the cannabinoid family that, we should be looking for in some of these preparations or, plants, and how can we benefit from them?
Well, we know that we're only going to find a very small percentage of these other cannabinoids, right? We're lucky to get 1% of CBN, maybe a little over 1% of CBC, hopefully close to 1% of CBG, depending.
Right.
So I think it's really going back to that idea of that whole plant medicine. It's not looking for that one strain that has 0.8 or 0.9 of CBC, because that's such a minimal difference, right? But what we really want is just that whole plant synergy. So to me, that's why we go for an ethanol extraction. Ethanol extraction is a botanical solvent that's been used for centuries, from Wiccan to back to, Chinese medicine when we originally started using cannabis as medicine. So that process, I move my hands all the time. That process allows us to bring out every cannabinoid, every terpene, all the other beneficial parts of the plant, from the flavonoids and the lipids. So we just want as much of every cannabinoid that we can get to be in that medicine, to give us more of that full spectrum, both from the synergistic energy level to that, whole plant terpenes, kind of Ethan Russo entourage effect that we're looking for.
And I think the other thing to think about too is that we saw the rise of CBG, and that was shortly right after the USDA hemp bill passed. And a lot of that was regulatory compliance, because CBGA, the mother of all cannabinoids, although it sounds like there's another one that might be the mother of all cannabinoids. So much, so fast.
I know.
That came to prominence because of regulatory compliance, because it supposedly shuts down the metabolic pathway for the production of THC. So, in choosing products, the one thing we like to do is grow several different cultivars because they're going to have different terpenes. They're going to have different levels of the CBC versus CBN versus CBG. So when I take those plants that are very unique and different from one another, and we blend them together, we want to spread that profile as far and wide as we possibly can so we can cover, you know, those components that might work well for you. We may not know which one works the best for you because we're going to have to kind of pull it apart, but let's try to do all in there. We got to thank the breeders for doing a lot of work on this too, because they're really working with a lot of their plants and trying to get a lot of these terpenes and a lot of these cannabinoids out to us. So hats off to a lot of the breeders.
So one of the questions that we have is, do the growers get to choose what to test on the labs? And because some lab sheets say not tested for mold, heavy metals, etc., can they selectively not test for areas that they feel will have problems?
Good
Absolutely.
question.
That's a great question.
You can hand pick and you can even experiment. I've had someone do this. Go to a lab website and go through the process and look at, oh, it's $195 for pesticides. It's $65 for terpenes. It's $170 for cannabinoids. It's $95 for heavy metals. You can pick one, you can pick two, you can pick 7 of them. So you can absolutely hand pick what you want to show on labs. So labs, we keep saying labs, 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 it's the best thing to go for, but there's also people falsifying labs with different programs on their computer. So then my next step is, after saying look for labs, is call and get lab verification. Now, maybe every person that's going to buy a product isn't going to do that, but if it's a nurse looking to recommend a product line, that's somebody I would recommend. It's worth taking that time and maybe calling the lab just to verify that these are, the actual accurate labs.
That's actually some great information, because as it's really hard. We were inundated with so many products in the market right now. The market is like flooded with products. So it's difficult to find like what's good, what's bad, what works, what doesn't. And then, just knowing, I think a lot of times when you're looking at this, I'm a nurse. So I tell everyone, I'm a nurse. I know how to take care of people. And yes, I know how to read labs, but these are different labs than the labs that we were, taught to read. So this is not my specialty area. So I think sometimes even coming in and looking at these labs, it's kind of like, okay, well, I can call and check, and verify these labs, but what exactly am I verifying? What exactly does this tell me? So if you could tell us, I'm going to do 2 ways here. If you can tell just a person off the street, a regular, non-medical person, hey, this is the best information I can give you for you to find the optimal product out there that's clean, that's, been processed properly, and that you're getting the best results. What is some information that we can leave them with? And then I'm going to have you do the same for nurses. And if those are the same, that's fine too. But I feel like, or for health professionals. So I would love to see if there's differences there.
First thing I would say is to make sure they have lab testing, right? And not just for potency, we're looking for purity testing. So they should have transparent testing with a minimum of, we say 6 panels typically. So you want to see 6 different things, and that includes the cannabinoids and the terpenes in there, in that 6. And you want to make sure that's from a certified independent lab. So make sure it's a good lab and make sure they have full panels is pretty much the basics. And the easiest way to look at the labs is looking for that fail pass. Most labs are pretty easy as far as those things that we're testing for that you really don't want to have in there.
Okay.
So that's kind of the lay person's version, I would say.
I would agree. Yep.
Okay.
The step up for the nurse would be to maybe call and verify that lab is the actual right lab, and that is the lab testing. Someone could look at my product, say, oh, that's Pro Verde Labs. Let me give Pro Verde a call and just say, hey, I want to confirm that this lab that I'm looking at on the website, lab number, here's, the lot number, hasn't been adulterated or changed at all. And they should be able to confirm that. And then you know that those labs that are showing transparency are actually the right labs. Because we have had people call us and say, hey, you know, I can change those labs. I can edit the top. I can paint, whatever it is. You have to have different programs to do it.
Mm-hmm. I just pulled up one of your labs just because maybe someone hasn't seen labs before. Maybe they haven't seen the certificate of authenticity. So I wanted to make sure that we had it so that they could see. This is full disclosure. This is NurseGrown Organics 1500 milligram CBD tincture. And this is lot number 013. And it tells you, you know, a little bit about them and then the product. And then I guess this is a drop of the oil here. Am I right? Okay. And then these are the cannabinoids and the potency here. So when you have these numbers, can you tell us about, because this was a question that I had, the ratio of CBD to THC, even though we're saying it's only 0.3% THC. So someone asked me yesterday, I got a question, which was, if the ratio is 26.8 to 1, then is this a 26.8 to 1, like CBD to THC product?
Yes.
Nurse. Okay, very good.
Typically, it's a 20 to 1 or above to be legally compliant with the amount of THC. So you will see pretty much every CBD product out there that's legally compliant, full spectrum, will be 20 to 1 or above.
Okay. And is there a limit to how above you can be?
No, the more it would just be getting, you know, less and less THC in the product. So it might end up, instead of being 0.3%, you might end up with 0.03%, you know.
Okay, very cool. And then these were some of the heavy metals. If you guys want to talk about any of these, because you can clearly discuss these way better than I can, but I just wanted to give people an idea of what this actually physically looks like. Even though they all differ a little bit, this is the gist of what you're going to see. I don't know, Matt, do you want to tell us a little bit about any of these metals or the microbiology?
I would say probably one of my biggest ones is the mycotoxins, because we know, and I think that's the third test down, and part of that is that mycotoxins are probably the largest single category that we test in the food industry. They are secondary metabolites from the fungi kingdom, and a lot of this will happen during post-harvest and handling at that point. But we know neurotoxins, depending on what they are, they could kill you in about 24 hours. So I consider this to be probably one of the biggest ones because the impact is so fast and so swift. And especially for smokable flower, for immunocompromised folks, this is not something we want you putting into your lungs in any way, shape, or form. So mycotoxins have now, after I've spent a lot of time looking into lab testing, mycotoxins are my #1 thing to look for first and foremost. Yeah.
And the other thing I like to remind people, Sandra, is if you have a 10-acre lot of flower and you're sending in a lab sample, you're likely only sending in 2 or 3 samples that are 3.5, 7 grams, and you're picking decent looking flower. You're not picking a piece that has any mold or mildew on it likely. So even though we're doing our due diligence and we're doing the best we can, we're not testing every pound individually. So I also like to teach people, especially when it comes to smokable flower, it only costs about $12 to get one of those little jeweler loops and really take a look at that flower if you don't know who your grower or who your farmer is, to also take a visual inspection and know what you're looking for on the plant too. You know, just getting to know your plant a little bit more intimately, whether you're not growing, but hey, you bought flowers, so take a look at it. Don't just break it up and roll it or stuff it in something or cook it in something. Actually look at it and open it up and crack it and look at the stem. And
do you have some flower, Jesselyn, that you can show us?
I have a whole room of it somewhere.
She's like, somewhere I have a room.
Like, sure.
I know. You know, because I think that's important for people to see, you know, what your buds should look like, you know, what the quality should be. I will be honest with you. the quality here at the dispensary, from very high-end products to very, you know, medium, whatever, middle of the road, I feel like the quality is all over the place. You know, I can buy a $80, you know, jar, 3.5 grams of, you know, cannabis, and it'll be brittle. And I'm like, what the heck is this? You know, and then I can get like something that's like middle of the road. And I'm like, oh, this is, you know, so sticky. And it's like, you know, it has that freshness to it. So I'm always like, what am I looking for here? You know what I mean? Like it's so complicated. And for people who don't, you know, have access or who have never touched flower before, because I know we have a lot of, especially nurses in states where it is illegal, I love to always show them buds so that they can see what it actually looks like and get them excited about the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt came back, so I know Matt brought me a surprise.
Yes.
I did.
Yay!
Ah,
And Matt and I were lucky enough to be judges for the first and only 2 cannabis cups for the state of Vermont. So it was really nice to go through the process. And I've actually developed my own criteria that several other feminine identifying people and I are going to start a little review of strains. And I think, Sandra, we should talk more about the idea of using that as a step stool to teach not only patients, but nurses what to look for in quality, because you need to be able to do a little cannabis review and know how to do that before you can actually say, wow, this is decent quality, let alone recommend it to a patient or somebody.
Well, plus
Yeah.
if you have,
That's
like
awesome.
here in California, there's patients that have their own stashes, you know what I mean? So I want to know, like when I look at their buds or look, you know, I want to know, is this fresh? Like, what is this? And what is this color? You know, you want to know what you're supposed to be looking for, because I think that's important. Like you said before, the last thing is you want somebody to inhale something that's going to cause, you know, more problems, and we're focused on healing. So tell us about the buds, Matt. This is my most exciting part. Y'all already know.
I brought a piece of lifter.
Ooh.
She's not fully trimmed. They're still in the cure bins.
Yeah.
But you know, when I look for cannabis, I like a little bit of a squish. I don't want it bone dry so that it just crumbles in my fingers. When I squish it a little bit, I also like having a smell. I like the terpenes to be out, knowing that I'm going to smell the cannabis and it's not going to smell like fresh cut grass or hay in any way, shape, or form.
You can see the crystals a little bit on the camera.
Oh yeah, they're shining a little bit.
Yeah, I like to pull it apart. You know, I kind of like to look in the middle because, you know, when you pull out a scope, you can see the remnants of insects. Which, you know, they're not the worst thing in the world to have. Ultimately, we hope people grow cleanly, but insects live outside and we're growing in nature. And so some of this is to be expected.
Right.
I like a good smell. I like a good squeeze. You know, ultimately for the person that's going to smoke it, I hope it's smooth. It should be smooth all the way through. You should not get a burn in your throat. Everyone talks about the white ash. I agree with the white ash to a certain extent. That's also a moisture content component. But it's the smell, it's the nose. And when you're buying, you know, premium flower, how well is it trimmed? For us, I like to trim it. I like to put them in buckets. We have stuff that's been curing for 10 months now that has a smell that I think blows most of the fresh flower out of the water. So the longer you cure it, the longer you get those components that were locked up in the leaves and all of those elements out of it and those gases to off gas, you get the absolute essence of that flower. And that is what I have put months and time and energy to bring beautiful taste, that nose and those terpenes right to your lips.
You should smell the blueberry.
I'm like, let me open this and let y'all smell it because it smells amazing.
The first person that makes an app that you can smell is going to do wonderful.
Yes, we need to get that app.
Yeah.
Matt, so I love something that you said, because you said it should be like squishy, but still, you know, you can still break it up. So one of the things that I find here is a lot of times when I do get like dispensary weed, I hate to say that, but it's so brittle. It's like, you know, and then when you try to smoke it or, you know, vape it or whatever, it burns so fast. Like it's done. You know what I mean? Because it's so dry. It's so dry. But you surprised me right now, Matt, because you said you have, I'm like, wait a minute. So you have hemp right now that is curing for 10 months?
We have not a lot of it. There's probably 20, 25 pounds of hemp that was left over from last year that's still in buckets that we still sell, that still has its labs, that smells absolutely out of this world.
Wow.
And, at least when it relates to THC cannabis, I think, things need to be cured for a minimum of several months till you truly get the essence of that plant. So I think the longer the cure, unfortunately, this is a pretty fast-paced industry. Most people do not cure their flower because it slows down the whole chain. So if you can find good cured flower, wow, it is, it's Christmas on your lips.
Wow. So my other question for you is what is the time frame? I mean, on average, outside of these few buckets that you have, what's the time frame of harvest to product? What should we be expecting? What is the, because sometimes I see stuff and I'm like, okay, well, it tells me when it was packaged, but it doesn't tell me when it was harvested. So my question is, what is the expectation from the time that something is harvested to the time it's packaged? What are we expecting there? And then when you have a product in a bottle, in a jar, in a tin, how long are these products good for? What's the shelf life of these products?
Good question.
I'll speak to flower quickly and I'll let her chime in on the other stuff. Flour is going to vary. Some people are going to cut it. They're going to dry it. Within a week, it's going to be in a bag. And it's not going to have that chance to break down. So it's going to start that decomposition process in that jar or that bag. So when you open it, you might get a weird smell. Good growers will cure it for a little bit. So, harvest, depending on the scale, that's a big factor in a lot of this. 7 to 10 days, typically a nice, slow, dry. You don't want to flash it. It's going to make it harsh. And then a cure. If you have the ability to put it in buckets and let it cure for months while you're trimming other things and getting it out, I think makes a world of difference. So I like looking, but no one keeps track of actual harvest date. We keep track of every plant we grew, its harvest date, the date it was planted, the date it was fertilized, the date it was hidden with microbes. I know those plants like the back of my hand. So flower's going to vary all over the place. But hopefully it's been cured for a couple months because you want that nose. You want to open the bag and get that nice smell and squish.
That's why we love you, Matt.
Tell us too a little bit about your line. Well, not a little bit, but just tell us about your line, like what products you offer and if you have any new items coming for 2021.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll finish up what Matt was saying. Sandra, those bags that we use, that's a reason we use those bags for the flower because they do such a phenomenal job. We actually tested them for 6 months before we decided to go with them because they do a really good job continuing.
I'm going to show the bags. We don't normally show products on here like this, but
show the back of it.
They have good quality.
I would open this, but I have open stuff over there. This is every day, y'all. This is every day.
So flower doesn't have much of a shelf life. I mean, what we do know is after, maybe 2 years, it's going to start to turn to some CBN and change the composition of the flower a little bit. And if it's not in a good container, it's going to be bone dry, like you're talking about some of the dispensary cannabis that you get. As far as other product, right now, there's not a lot of research showing us the actual shelf life of products that have cannabinoids in it. So when you see something that gives you a 2-year shelf life, you really don't know if it's actually a 2-year shelf life. So I personally feel about 1 year to 1.5 years shelf life is probably the longest I'm comfortable right now saying that it's going to be stable. Luckily, I have a friend and another scientist that's doing some testing to figure out shelf life a little bit more. So hopefully we'll have a better idea. But right now we don't know a ton. So we do, 1 year to 1.5 years, maybe 2 years on a balm or something like that would be the max shelf life until we have more of that research showing that long-term stability. And for product right now, we have a typical, what you call a tincture, which is a CBD oil. We choose hemp seed oil as the carrier, and there's a lot of different carrier oils. Hemp seed definitely has that greener, earthier flavor. We also have coming out in the next, well, hopefully 2 weeks, depending, as soon as we get the labels done, a CBA CBD combination. It's a 5-to-1, so it has five, the ratio is 5 of CBD to 1 CBDA to have a little bit more of the acidic cannabinoid to help with some more inflammation. And for people that CBD just isn't quite cutting it. So that's our next new one coming out. Within the next month, I keep saying within the next month, but it's been slow. We also have elderberry, blueberry vegan gummies coming out, which we're super excited about. So those are the 2 newer products coming out. Besides that, we get a ton of wonderful feedback on our balm, which is arnica and frankincense infused. We have some wonderful aromatherapy massage oils, which are deeply rooted and rise up. And we picked the names before 2020, but it perfectly kind of just fit for 2020. So some beautiful scented aromatherapy. We have capsules because some people don't like the flavor and prefer to swallow a pill or something like that. So, and also the DIY, which is what Sandra worked with a little bit the other night, which is the whole idea of getting people's hands in the medicine and looking at the herb and crafting their own stuff and being their own healer. So
guys, first of all, I just want to thank you for the concept of the DIY kit. Ivory knows my thing. She always says, I'm just all about touch the herbs. I'm like, don't be afraid. I'm like, you have to build a relationship with this plant. And the way to build that relationship is by, putting your hands in it. And, the biggest challenge for people is that if you are getting any kind of the DIY kit and you're making it at home, the smell was like 99% of what freaks people out. And I was like, my house smells so good. And, but it's actually fascinating because, part of what you guys are doing is making this accessible to so many people, just in that DIY kit. It makes it accessible to a lot of people because they don't have to smoke it if they don't want to. They can, the DIY kit, you can make your own oil, you can make your own salve, you can do plenty of, they were already trying to make gummies yesterday. I'm like, okay, so they were ahead of the game. But it was cool because I got to show them, what happens when you put your hands on this product and how empowering it is for you to, touch the plant and just feel the benefits of, you really do start feeling well just when you're starting to work with those plants and smelling those terpenes. And every single person that opened their jar was like, oh, it smells so good. So thank you for that. Because I think, that's such a great entryway for people to learn about cannabis. And also when people are creating these products, even though this is not going to be like the highest end product or, that in the land, okay, what it does is it shows you how simply this plant grew in the ground in the very earth that we walk on and was picked and trimmed and, cured, okay, was dried somewhere. And then you have the ability to take that plant the way it came out of the ground and make something so powerful and beautiful and healing. And so I think that to me is the magic right there, because it gives you a greater picture as to why the hell is this plant still not legal? You know what I mean? Like, why are we here?
And I was going to go into that, Sandra, because I joke with Sandra because she likes to touch the plant and I like to touch the policy. So when she was saying that, I was going to ask you guys, because I'm deep into that, because I live in Louisiana, she lives in California. So our experience, our access is different. So you can tell why I'm more probably interested in the policy because, hello. So I was going to ask you guys, Matt, you kind of touched on it a little bit too. As far as policy, like what are you guys looking to come down the pipe for 2021 or even further as far as regulatory concerns, or what type of movement in Congress, or what are you looking for as far as advancing, cannabis legislation?
I'm, as far as the hemp thing goes, I'm looking for some standardization and at least, requiring full panel testing. You're not going to go buy Advil or Tylenol if that stuff wasn't tested and was made in someone's home kitchen with kids and dogs and pet dander running around. So you need to hold that same standard to this. This is a health product too. That's one big thing I would like to see. Me personally, I would much rather see decriminalization than I would legalization, because I think legalization still has a huge component of greed built into it. And, even here in our small state of Vermont, one of the components of the bill here is that to be able to grow outside under our tax and regulate bill, you have to own at least 28.5 acres. So we're seeing a small person put out of this without those kind of opportunities. And this should be for all of us, because I will tell you this, growing cannabis is more addictive than ingesting it, smoking it, anything else. Once you grow these plants, you are addicted to it and you will fall into the love
He's
of
up there. He's like,
yeah, exactly.
my grower.
So I would see more standardization. I would like to see more testing. Kudos to all you nurses for educating people, because I think once we have an educated consumer base, they're going to be able to sift through a lot of the snake oil that is out there, and those people will get weeded out from this industry that don't have a decent product. So I'm really hoping we offer some standardization for consumers.
You speak in her language. You said decrim. She's like, yes, all right.
Well, it's a lot of bills, and of course we know we don't know what will pass or where it would go. It depends upon the makeup really of who's in Washington next year. But yeah, I do look at that, because I don't think that your access should be determined on what state you know what I'm saying, that you live in. So I am ready for federal intervention.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, the challenge is when you are a medical patient, you can't go anywhere. I can't go visit Ivory because I got to think logistically, how am I going to survive leaving my state? This is a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem.
This is a problem. I can't go to New York. I can't go to Virginia. I can't see my family without a logistical nightmare of how this is going to work. And I mean, we all know how it goes down. You know what I mean? We all know what happens. You just do it. But then you're like, and
to break the law and continue the cycle and the process of the government putting you in that position for you to then have legal repercussions.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's the biggest challenge. Like, I know, if you go to what is the website for the aviation? My brain went, but if you go, like, if you're going to fly, they have a policy. It's like, they're not looking for it. What does that even mean? You're not looking for it, but if they find it, they will remove it from your bags, from your stuff. So it's interesting. So I definitely feel we need, broad scale, laws that are going to cover everyone everywhere they go. Because if I can take my Tylenol, or let's forget Tylenol. Okay. If I can take my Xanax and all the other things, then why can't I take my cannabis? That's the question that I have here. And then,
You're in a very interesting position though, because I believe there's 2 airports in California where you could walk in with what you're capable of, what you're allowed to hold, and you could fly to wherever you want. Just don't go out of the security checkpoint and have to come back in. There's a few airports where you can, Portland, Oregon, I believe is another one. Yeah. You can look it up, get on the plane.
You just have to carry it in your carry-on bag, which is also even more. It's just it's like, are we really doing this? Because you're looking at me and you're looking at my drugs. You're looking at me and you're looking at my drugs, but you're going to let me pass. But if I put it in the suitcase, it may not make it where it's going.
And you probably have a mask on, so you're carrying drugs with a mask. This brings us back to like the 80s of this is what we were doing in the 70s and 80s and stuff.
It's crazy. That is a good policy point, though, Sandra. That is something that needs to be, traveling is a nightmare.
Traveling is a nightmare. You know, we went, so I mean, full disclosure, we went to Louisiana. I took my vape pens. I hate vape pens. It's like, if you want to like, it's like the death of me. Like I have to use this oil. Like this is so standard for me. So the problem is that, and I will admit this, is a lot of times those vape pens give me like a cloud of fog or something. It's like it doesn't wear off like normal. I don't know what's in there. It's always confusing. So, you know, you do the best that you can, but you have to travel with these like alternative devices and options. And the truth is, I could probably survive a few days like this, but long-term, that's impossible. You know, think about people who really, really need this medicine to function minute to minute. Like, you know, this is the stuff that keeps me up at night, you know, so I hope that we get to that place where, you know, we can get access for all, and that we have more farms and farmers like you guys who are doing the work and making sure that we have quality products. We go hard here for quality and, you know, for people who are doing it, you know, have a standard and lift up this industry. And you guys have really, really impressed us. So I just want to say thank you so much for what you guys are doing there in Vermont. I mean, I'm in California and I get my CBD from Vermont. That just tells you something.
Yeah.
I just want people to hear that again. No, I'm just kidding.
And we appreciate that big time. Absolutely. And we will
you know,
do what we do and do the best that we can.
you know, I'm one of those people that people will ask me, oh, they're like, well, can I just go? I'm like, listen, I'm going to just show you, you know, as a matter of fact, here, smell this. Okay. Just smell it, come back later. Let me know what you think about it. And that's it, you know, or try this balm or whatever it is. I have access to lots of things here. I go to the grocery store. There's 20 million CBD products. They're all full spectrum. They're all confusing because I don't know where they're manufactured or what's what. So transparency is key. And one thing that you guys did today, which I just want to thank you again, is, you know, you said we don't know the long term. You know, if we look at the labs, we do the best that we can. We're testing, we're doing all this, you know, but long term, this is still, you know, there's a lot to be learned. And I feel like that's where we always need to go back to that, because seriously, I just saw somebody had a little tagline. They teach a class and it said, if your cannabis class is not live, then it's already outdated or something like that. And I said, that's the best tagline ever. I forget who that was, but I'm like, that's the best tagline, because it's true. It's like, this is so ever changing, and we're learning and learning every single day, you know, about the power of the plant, not because the information isn't out there, but because people were so underground with this for so long. Now we're trying to find like, hey, the guy who was growing it, you know, in the dark, you know, in the secret woods over here. Now we're trying to find out like, hey, what did you learn all those years growing it out here, you know, when you were a rogue? You know, now we're trying to go to those master farmers to find this information. And I feel like, you know, the government has really kept us, you know, from knowing and learning everything that we can. But I'm so glad that we have people like you who are willing to put it all out there on the line. So thank you for that.
You.
I think we're going to be wrapping up, but I want to make sure that I get all your information out there. So NurseGrownOrganics.com, and then on
NurseGrown.com.
Oh, NurseGrown.com. Okay, NurseGrown.com. And I should know that. NurseGrown.com. And then on Instagram, there's a hyphen somewhere. So tell us how it is on Instagram.
I think it's NurseGrown
_ organics.
Yes.
Okay. And then on Facebook, they're
NurseGrown _
Organics.
Okay. On Insta.
So she'll put that in the thread. And then anything else you want to leave us with? You know, I always feel like what you guys have going there is so awesome. I want everyone to try the products. If you want to try good quality products, go on there. They have a coupon on their site. I think it's 25% off for nurses till the end of the year. So go get you some flower. Okay, everybody get flour. Okay, just get the flour so you can smell it and know what it is that's in all the other products. They have smaller bags than this. This is a bigger bag. They have the small 3.5 bag. But get some products in your hand and see and smell and try. You know, a lot of times nurses, we are the worst because, or healthcare professionals, because we learn by books and we learn to know all these theories and, you know, the science of things, but we're okay. And I'll give an example. I was a maternity nurse for a long time. I never had a baby.
Cannabis
And I would, what'd you say?
Some cannabis nurses have never gotten to touch a plant.
No, and that's what I'm saying. So I was a maternity nurse for years and I was like, oh, I'm helping people, you know, give birth, but I literally could not empathize with them in a real, like physical way because I didn't know what that felt like to like carry a baby and go through 9 months. And then I had my own and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, y'all. But saying that, the experience taught me so much. Experience is a great teacher. And so if you want to be a great cannabis nurse, I really, really encourage you to try products and see how they make you feel and be your own testimony, because your story is the most powerful thing that you own. And the truth is that there are a lot of, right now with COVID and everything going on, everyone can use a good night's sleep and some anti-anxiety, anti-depression, all that good stuff, and get your immune system up. So try different products and see what's out there, but definitely check out NurseGrown. And Matt and Jesselyn, we love you guys to death. Thank you so much for coming on here. If you have anything else that you want to add, please let us know. And Ivory, what you got?
No, I'm good.
One thing
Okay.
I would add is
Yeah.
Sandra's wearing beautiful earrings
Oh,
made by a 13-year-old girl in Vermont who is donating all proceeds to Little Brown Girl. So if anyone wants, we make no money off it. 100% of proceeds go right to the organization. So they also have keychains. So if you're interested, those are also on our website as well.
yes. And something really cool, nurses, I forgot to mention this.
Awesome.
Something that's really cool that's also on the website, which I don't have one because I haven't placed an order this week, but is the journals. So if you're working with patients and you're trying to help them with their cannabis journey, go on the website and they have amazing journals and they are so helpful for you to help your patient become independent, because we don't want to tell our patients what to do. We just guide them. But these are great for them to keep track of what they're doing, how they're feeling, and all the wonderful things that, you know, the plant is helping them with, as well as, you know, any side effects. Because here's the thing. All these plants are amazing. They're all wonderful, but sometimes people can have unwanted effects. So we want to be realistic and know that, you know, we need to track those as well. I always tell my patients, I'm mostly checking in to see if there's anything you don't want to feel. Because usually they'll say, well, I don't know if I'm feeling anything. I'm like, that's okay. But are you having any unwanted feelings? Let's go start from there. So this is a great way for you to help your patients and guide them with something tangible that they can write in. And then something that I plan on doing, because I use sheets for this right now, but it's nice to have a book, is you can have them take a picture of it and send it to you. And that way you have now a little record of what is going on with your patients. So that's all I got for today. Thank you so much.
Those journals were made by one of our nurse affiliates, April, who did a great job in that. We do have a nurse affiliate program. So if there are any other nurses that are interested, feel free to reach out. We love growing our little entourage team.
Yes. And I will tell you the products, again, you know, once you have a solid product, whether it's this product or any other product, you know, it's really helpful for your patients. Your patients are always going to ask your clients, whatever you want to call them, they're always going to ask you for recommendations. That's like I felt like that was the question they asked me. And for literally, I mean, I talked to Jesselyn last year when she first started, and I was like, yes. You know, I'd love to be an affiliate with you guys. But then I kind of was unsure because I had to learn what's out there and what's not and everything else. So in my trial and error, you know, I ended up going back to NurseGrown and saying, you know what, I love this product. This feels good for me. And so that's what you need to do as well, because your patients are going to ask you for products. And I was recommending, you know, what I thought were the best products, because that's what's out there. And people say it's like the standard, you know, and they're products that are very well known. But we're just gonna say that, you know, you learn and you grow. So make sure you're learning. And you know, NurseGrown, they're awesome and amazing. If it doesn't work for you, find what works for you. You know, find what's out there that's going to be beneficial for your clients. But I definitely would say check out NurseGrown. If you go to their website, on the top it says something about 25% off. Blah blah blah. They need a code.
Yes, for nurses, it is Year of the Nurse and Midwife.
Year of the Nurse and Midwife, y'all. So go get you some products and then come back on here on this thread and tell us how you like them, so that NurseGrown can know, you know, everything that's
Year
happening.
of the Nurse and Midwife.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you, and Jesselyn, Matt, keep up the awesome work over there. I can't wait to come visit the farm.
Yay!
You'll never want to leave.
I'm sure.
I'm like, I mean, if it wasn't for COVID, I would have already been there. So,
Yeah.
all right, you
y'all.
guys, have a great night. Take
Have a good
care.
one.
Thanks for having us. Thanks so much for what you do.
Bye-bye.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.